Hey everyone, welcome back with Ermac, where today, of course, we're continuing our playthrough of Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks with Smoke. No, not Big Smoke. If you want some of him, I'm sorry folks, you gotta go over to my Monday playthroughs on Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. We already got a few in here, you know, I might do, I might send a link to the playlist in the description below if you want to check that out and stuff. It's a lot of fun. Always a good time playing some old classic PS2 era, Grand Theft Auto and stuff like that. San Andreas, of course, has the RPG elements, but that's not what we're playing today. Today on Fighting Friday, we're playing, Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. And as you can see, I'm actually using Johnny Cage's moveset now. Why? Why the hell not? I've already switched my character up a little bit, and I don't need any story-specific progression things or anything like that. So, why the heck not? Just add a little bit of variety to the play session here and stuff. Let you guys see some different moves and combos and that whole ordeal.
And we have to stop Melina before that can happen. I knew you were going to say that.
Such a campy game, man. The PS2 era voice acting and stuff like that, it was something else, that's for sure. And now that we have the wall run ability and stuff like that, now we can just directly run up the walls, and at least that's the idea here. I just can't freaking run up in a straight line, I guess. There we go. But yeah, I don't know. I just never understood the point of having to do the wall bouncing back and forth thing and stuff like that. Alright, there we go. Okay, I think we're good now. But yeah, I never really understood the whole point of that. I don't know. It's just weird to me. Just feels like extra unnecessary work. And I don't know what it is, but I don't know. I feel like the regular portal area was a lot more magical than the secondary hub world portal area. But at least they do give you a lot more places to fight at. I think it's just because like the other place resembles the actual portal stage a little bit better than what that area was. But here we are with the Wastelands, and I've talked about atmosphere and music. I mean, the music in this area, the atmosphere that we get in it. This was definitely a stage I think that needed the most expanding from MK2, because in MK2, let's be honest, it's by far and away the worst stage. It's just purple. That's literally the stage, and I think they do a very good job of like keeping up with that aesthetic a little bit in this while making it look. It really, it was supposed to be like the battlefield of Outworld, essentially. That's why it's the Wastelands and stuff like that, and I think they did such a much better job of like kind of showing you what the original intent and idea of this area was going to be. And, Armageddon kind of took a different approach with it, where it's like, you're fighting in the... So weird. It's like you're fighting on a platform and it's like a gated area or something like that. And, then there's the catapults, of course, when you get knocked down the stairs and stuff like that. And, that's one interpretation. I really like the death trap in that stage where you get hurled into the freaking wall with a catapult. And then, I think then eventually, obviously, MK9 took a crack at it. And, it's kind of sad to see the purple elements kind of go, But I think this game, they kind of did it the best. Because, it's just a simple area. The purplish hue and stuff like that is still there. But you can kind of... It's just a very dark place. And, really speaks to the battlefield. It kind of makes me wonder what the battles were fought here for, Are these like Adenian soldiers that are, now that their souls have been... now that they've been killed here, their souls are corrupted and stuff like that. Are these just random Outworld soldiers? What battle was fought here, Just seems like an evil place. But it kind of makes you wonder, was this like at one point the area in which, had the most beauty to it? Potentially. Apparently, according to Raiden and the Evil Tower, this place was Outworld as a whole was once a place of undescribable beauty. So I don't know. It would be pretty nice if we were ever able to kind of see like an Outworld or something like that. When it's not like, I guess just the villain's hideout or whatever. Which I mean, I think Mortal Kombat 1 could have had that opportunity if they hadn't done that. I don't know, I haven't played the Mortal Kombat 1 story, but it would have been like a cool kind of, I guess, twist to have, you know, like Outworld in which it's, you know, like you don't have to turn Earthrealm or anything like that into like, you know, the place that got taken over, but it would have been pretty cool if like, you know, Outworld, because of like the timeline differences, Liu Kang made sure to pay much more attention to make sure that like, you know, it wasn't taken over by like a Shao Kahn or something like that. But I don't know, people, they always say like you need chaos, you know, to counterbalance peace, but I never really understood that. Like, I think chaos is just kind of like caused by assholes rather than like an actual need of balance or anything like that. Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I feel like I could live a peaceful life like this, you know?
Test your might.
I don't think the world needs any more excitement from, you know, murderers, Jesus Christ, murderers, and well, you probably already know the other word I was gonna say in place of that, but I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of a theme that I feel like a lot of TV shows and stories and stuff like that go with as to why there has to be conflict, you know? I think it's just kind of a phony reason. But now we're off to an early boss battle here. We're gonna run into Smoke's buddy here from the Lin Kuei, Sub-Zero. He must be, you know, mind controlled just like Katana was, so we're gonna have to beat some sense into him. I also like how the clever use of the camera here, like, he's supposed to have like the scar on him, but like it's just you can't see it. And I'm pretty sure it's just like, it's not that his character model doesn't have one, it's just that they hide it pretty well until, you know, it comes into the scene, which, you know, Kung Lao cuts Sub-Zero's eye. But even stuff like that, that was like such a cool detail, like back in the day, just like, oh wow, that's how he got the scar. Like, obviously it's just kind of this game's interpretation of it. But, you know, kind of like how every game now seems to have like, you know, Kung Lao dying, or, you know, Jax, a different way, where Jax loses his fucking arm at this point. It's like, they're like running jokes. But I don't know. I'm surprised there isn't some like running joke on how like Sub-Zero, you know, gets his freaking scar every game or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of one of those like those Destiny things. Also, the freaking ambience music in this game. I mean, I've kind of talked about how much I've really come to in recent times really appreciate the music that was around this time. And I don't know, like the Wuxi Academy music is so beautiful and stuff like that. You know, I've already kind of said a lot of this stuff in previous videos, but you know, the Wastelands ambience always kind of just, you know, the same thing. It always kind of stuck with me. Like even in I remember like the thing I used to love Mortal Kombat in the 3D era for too was back in the day, you know, it felt like you really got a lot of really cool things in the crypt and stuff like that. You know, instead of just using it to be forced RPG elements or stuff like that to add more artificial things in there. I know it's not most people's favorite things, but I love the fact that I could buy production art and, you know, it would actually tell me, you know, in the 3D era, it actually would tell you a lot of times what the intent behind the drawing was. Maybe sometimes why it didn't work. You know, just all sorts of really cool things that, you know, you wouldn't see otherwise that you can find in the crypt and stuff like that. You know, like in Deception, I always think of like the torture minigame. You know, it seemed like it was kind of like a precursor to like the stage transition things that I can't remember what it's called exactly, but it's like when you transition to different areas in the DC versus Mortal Kombat game. You know, there's things where like you have to press the buttons, you know, the 4 face buttons, and you know, you fight on your way down and stuff like that. And it was a pretty cool mechanic, and it was almost kind of like a precursor to that, 'cause it was like, you know, if you're on a ledge, then it's like, you know, a button mashing test your might style game in which you know, one guy who's on top is stomping on your hands to send you into the death trap below. I'm glad we didn't get that, but it was still just cool to see like, hey, there was no reason whatsoever to even show us this picture of something that was probably only like maybe just that, like a concept drawing, something that was just kind of like, hey, you know, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? And probably no further work was done on it, and that's the kind of stuff that I loved. They got, you know, that's kind of why I like beta content. You know, it's probably in a way, you know, how I fell in love with that stuff. And I don't know. It's just, to me, it's sad now that like you just kind of get like speed drawings or something like that in the game and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, relating to the point with the music was, I remember like you could buy a video where it was like showing the beta footage of Conquest. I think it was maybe like an E3 demo, or like, you know, showing off Conquest, some of the areas, and you see a lot of unused areas, and it's just kind of like a camera going through like the, you know, a valley and stuff like that, and the whole time it's playing is the music is playing is the Wastelands ambience music, and it always just kind of stuck to me. And I remember I just kind of spent years trying to figure out what the name of that music was, and then I finally found it, which obviously was in this game. And man, I mean, I think that's this is kind of a song that I love to have in my videos when I get the chance. It's in all my Resident Evil Outbreak key items and event checklist guides and stuff like that. Which honestly, you know, give me a lot more views than I actually thought. You know, it's pretty interesting to think that, you know, I made a guide on those games and people are still kind of checking those out to this day. You know, it's not like a whole bunch of people, but like, you know, I still get some subscribers off of that. And you know, it's kind of nice to know, like, even though there are some other guides, I kind of just made mine per scenario and stuff like that. And it's kind of nice to know, you know, that, you know, I'm still kind of helping people out with that guide, you know, that I released a few years ago. And that most of all, the people are still playing Resident Evil Outbreak to this day and stuff, and experiencing it for the first time, obviously. And you know, I try and answer people's questions as quickly and consistently as I can, but sometimes I'll ask people like to clarify things, and I don't know, maybe they moved on or they found the answer in another way or something like that. But sometimes it can be difficult to kind of remember every single detail in that game, you know. So I might have to freaking take a day or two to freaking turn on the game real quick, figure out what they're talking about, and see, like, because a lot of the issues people sometimes have, it's just kind of like things that don't really have to do with anything, like of completing a checklist or a key item or something like that. So I don't know, it's just I had to like go into the game and tell them like, yeah, well, the issue that you're having doesn't really amount to anything, so don't worry about it. Yeah, man, I'm kind of free. Ever since like I was playing this one time and with Reptile and on this area, I made it like almost like I think halfway through or something like that, and then one of the zombies just smacked me, just kind of like that. But I ended up like going underneath the stage, and I wasn't able to die. I wasn't able to get back on the boat or above the land or anything like that. And I don't know, I'm just terrified that that's gonna happen during one of these playthroughs again, even though it only happened the one time with Reptile. But I think I was like in like a weird position on the boat to begin with. It was always cool too. Like I think that's even a reused asset from Deception. That's a King Jared statue, and it's kind of a cool thing. Like if you don't know what you're looking for with it, like you have no idea that that's like actually a pretty relevant character. Like obviously it never was a fighter, but obviously like King Jared's always been in the war in some way. But like I said, I mean, I think with the timeline issues, like the characters can't really progress in modern Mortal Kombat, and it just seems like they have the archetypes of the characters, and they don't really grow, they don't really change, they don't really have very much motivations. They're kind of just there a lot of the time. It's just kind of like a basic good versus evil thing at this point. A lot of the time, it feels like, and I don't know. It just kind of it bugs me a little bit, obviously, because I've mentioned it a few times. But I don't know. Like I said, I think that's just kind of like a trope in a lot of things nowadays, you know, with reboots and new series and stuff like that. I think unfortunately, as a society, we've kind of gone to a point where you know, we can't really move on from certain things. Obviously, I mean, I love this game. I can't move on from this game ever, but you know what I mean. Like obviously, like if they made a Mortal Kombat with all these new characters and really went into a completely new direction to try and change things up and, you know, a new spin on the series, they already kind of tried to do that with MKX, and they kind of did it in a safe way when you think about it. Because, you know, obviously they still had all the classic characters and stuff like that, which I think is probably the best way to do it, to be honest. But obviously that didn't really pan out, and they kind of had to backtrack, and, you know, Cassie Cage obviously didn't really work out very well. I think that was just kind of forced. I think what they should have done was MK10. It was tough because obviously, you know, Liu Kang was dead, so they needed some new hero, obviously. They couldn't go with Kung Lao because he was also dead. And Katana, once again, dead. So, like, any character you could kind of think, huh, maybe we could, you know, push them into the spotlight. They were already dead, so it kind of felt very forced, you know. Obviously, you know, Shinnok getting his ass kicked by Johnny Cage at the beginning of the game due to horseshit god powers that were apparently never a thing in the original timeline, I guess. I don't know, it just felt very forced, and then like having Cassie Cage in there, and it's just the way, the nature of story mode, and why I don't really like it in modern Mortal Kombat games is because it's always set up in which villains can never look powerful. The villains always look bad. They can't ever really do it in a way in which, you know, sometimes they can do it where the hero looks good at times, don't get me wrong. Obviously, you know, Fire God Liu Kang was a pretty cool thing. It's still weird to me. I hate the idea of like fusion. Obviously, like, it turns out that wasn't the thing. It was just somebody, you know, I remember I seen like a post of somebody saying that's what it was before I spoiled the hell out of the game for me. And I seen a post about how they fuse and stuff like that. Obviously, that's not what the case is. It turns out that Rain just, you know, transferred his god powers over to Liu Kang and made him an Elder God and all this other stuff. And, you know, obviously I can believe the main character of the story becoming a god. Okay. Obviously, it also helps that Kronika is probably one of the worst villains, you know, story-wise in the entire series. Shinnok is pretty damn close, but I mean, if you can manipulate time and freeze time and, you know, essentially set time how you want it, and you have a guy that's completely invincible, you know, cannot die no matter what, and you still fucking lose, not once, but twice, and even more times than that in, like, certain other stories, like, you're pinging yourself in the corner, and you just look like an idiot no matter what, you know, if you can manipulate time like that. So, I don't know, it's just, what are you gonna do, right? I think it just was a bad idea, like I said, with the timeline to bring it in the first place, but you know, it is what it is, I guess. But I feel like, you know, they've had a very tough time due to the story mode. Sub-Zero, get your ass over there. What the fuck? Get over there! Oh my god. There we go. Oh my god. Yeah, I'll defend you if you start doing something. But yeah, I don't know. I've just the story mode, like, because the way it's set up, it seems like there's always jobbers, and, you know, that's kind of what. As much as I think 9 worked, you can still see all the errors in there. You know, Reptile was once such a prominent character, and they had to make him a jobber in that game, and just constantly lose. Because obviously, you know, in their head, if the hero lost, they'd have to be killed essentially. Unless if something crazy happened, like, oh yeah, forget about them, Reptile. Shao Kahn said he needs you in your throne room right now. And, you know, Sindel coming in and killing off most of the characters out of nowhere when they could have spaced it out. Melina kind of felt like a jobber. Freaking Baraka was definitely a jobber. Baraka was once, it felt like around, you know, the early parts, he was like a pretty big deal. And then it just, you know, it felt like in, jeez, man, it felt like in 9, like, he just kind of, like, lost all of his favor and stuff like that with, Ed Boon and stuff. I don't know. And then, you know, there's just a few characters like that. Shiva, who's a freaking Shokan, lost, like, 5 times. Goro and Kentaro got their butts whooped by Cyber Sub-Zero. I think a few times, like, Kentaro just gets his butt whooped in that game. There's times where people will literally lose to one person will beat 2 people at the same time, but then one of the 2 people that got beat will beat the one person in story mode later on, and it's just, I don't know, it's just a mess, man. That's the thing, like, And like and like Armageddon Deception stuff too, like people had to lose to Taven and stuff like that too. So it's not like a new thing when you kind of really think about it. And obviously, since those were the heroes in the newest games, with Shujinko, I think it actually really makes sense when you look at the war, though. Obviously, because he was granted the ability to, you know, instantly possess and copy the abilities of any fighter he encountered. So at least they had probably the best excuse as to why he could pretty much take on anybody he ever fought, especially since we go through the journey with him, you know, training with Boraicho, you know, the ancestors of Sub-Zero for the Lin Kuei. And, you know, like Ermac and Ashra, you know, he constantly learns from people too. So we've seen his whole journey, and for as much as people don't like him because he's kind of like, you know, I don't know, I kind of agree. I get what people mean when they say, like, Shujinko's an idiot, but at the same time, like, he started his journey when he was, like, freaking teenager, I would imagine. Probably, like, 13, 14 or something like that. Probably just past puberty. But at the same time, like, I don't know, it's tough because it was a fun story to play through, but it's a means to an end. And I don't know if Mortal Kombat since the early days have ever really had a good story with good gameplay at the same time, you know what I mean? Because, like, even MK11, I thought the story was fantastic up until around the end. And once again, it's just they built a character, Kronika, that no matter what happened, they can manipulate time, they can freeze time, unless if it has to do with Elder Gods. She could have prevented a lot of other things from happening herself by just appearing to where, like, Liu Kang and them were and whatever, and just kill herself, when Raiden was not around or something like that. Or she could have fought off Raiden, have Geras take care of them while, you know, she's freaking fighting off Raiden or something like that. But then again, I can't remember. Maybe Geras, like, he would be frozen by time too. I can't remember. But either way, I feel like, you know, they kind of have to make a lot of their villains look like idiots. And Shao Kahn, I feel like, was probably the best portrayed. And, you know, even in his game, he lost twice. So, I mean, but there was always, like, a good excuse as to why he lost, you know. I mean, he outright lost to Liu Kang, and that's fine. He's the main guy. And he was established for games for a long period of time as the main guy. And added that with, you know, the fuel of, you know, Kung Lao recently being killed. You know, Liu Kang did what he had to do, and, you know, he just wasn't able to finish the job, essentially. And then, you know, Shao Kahn invaded Earthrealm, and because he broke the rules, you know, Raiden, of all people, took him out. And, you know, things worked out in that way. But then, you know, and I don't know, it's just, then it kind of came into, like, MK11, he got beat by Katana in a fair one-on-one, and I feel like Katana just wasn't built up to that point yet, and it seems like it's just, your character is only good in their specific chapter and stuff like that, you know? So, like I said, I mean, it's a tough thing to do. You know, I'm not even necessarily sure if I could come up with a story like that, so, you know, take it for how you want to take it. That said, I just feel like, I don't know. I'd say probably the best story that they did would probably have to be Shaolin Monks. But once again, we've been trained to know people are going to die. Like, even Jade, she's technically not evil, but in this game she was, and stuff like that. They even kind of hint that, you know, Jade was Melina's partner, not Katana's. And I think that this game kind of uses that to full effect. Whereas in, like, the new ones, it feels like they kind of don't really kill people off that often, when you would think it'd be just as simple as, like, okay, you know, I'm fighting Smoke. You know, I'm Baraka, I beat Smoke, and then I kill Smoke, and stuff like that. But, I mean, even then, that said, I guess, you know, like, Devora, you know, she killed Baraka off, and people were pissed off about that. But I think that was still around the time when people were kind of like, okay, well, that doesn't mean... I think it was like, you know, even though it was a thing for a while at that point, I think it was kind of MK11 rebooting the timeline for a third time, or I guess it would be technically like combining them, and kind of really for proving and showing to the mass audience death doesn't really mean anything. So I'm assuming that's why people were so pissed off at Devora, and, you know, killing Baraka and stuff like that, because, you know, we were under the impression Baraka wouldn't come back or anything like that. And obviously he wasn't in MK10.
I think it was when we were separated while fighting
But I don't know. I mean, do you guys have any ideas in the comments below on how you think, you know, a Mortal Kombat story could be handled in a proper way in which, you know, people are built up properly and, you know, nobody ends up looking like idiots, I guess. I think with Shujinko, I'm like half and half on it, because, you know, obviously he also did things where he would just do random favors for people, and, like, you know, he tried to avoid trouble with the guys like Shao Kahn, despite probably being able to kick their ass. And to even, I think a lot of people, they say he's generic, and, you know, that he was kind of just overpowered and stuff like that. I think it was cool he was kind of like a half god, but it's tough, you know, because you had to kind of build these people up over a period of time, and sometimes I think, you know, just one game doesn't really do it that well, you know. It's kind of like with wrestling. You have to build them up over a period of time before people really are willing to accept them as major characters and stuff like that. Although Tekken, I think, is a lot better at it. That said, though, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please remember to like and subscribe. Check out next week's episode, but above all else, please remember to have a nice day.